You're watching the Letterman podcast with Mike Chisholm, endorsed by the Hello Deli.
Yeah.
It's the Letterman podcast. It's better than all those podcasts about those other men. Let the fun begin.
Welcome once again to the Letterman podcast. My name is Mike Chisholm. All right, we got Ritch Duncan today. Now, who's Ritch Duncan? He's a comic, he's a comedy writer. He's been around the New York scene for a long time, and has worked on all sorts of stuff. There's a reason why he was actually recommended to me by former booker for Stupid Pet and Stupid Human Tricks, Ben Zelevansky. We had a great episode last year. I love Ben. He's great guy. And he's like, hey, you need to talk to Ritch. Ritch came up through the sketch comedy culture in New York with the Stangles. I'm like, oh, okay, that's kind of cool. The Stangles, of course, famously head writers for Late Show for a long time, and in my opinion, did a phenomenal job of taking things off of Dave's plate when it came to the rehearsals and things like that, so we could get years and years more of Late Show than we maybe would have. I appreciate what they brought to the table. And so there was that. But also throughout many of the things that he did, I mean, he worked with Colin Quinn. He was, faxing jokes in for Weekend Update, working on all sorts of stuff with True TV. There was a segment at the end of the run of Late Show with David Letterman, and it was to do with Billy Eichner, Billy on the Street. And Dave did a Billy on the Street segment. He was part of that. And he tells the story of that day in this episode. He is also, he and Ben and a couple other partners have a concept called Deathbed comedy, or Deathbed horror stories by comedy writers is essentially what the premise is. Steve Young has a story coming out. You can go to deathbedwriting.com and you can see that. We had just had a delightful conversation on the influence of Letterman, some of his brushes with people on the show, and then of course that segment with Billy Eichner. The Letterman podcast has one sponsor only, and that is hello-deli.com. That's right. Hello-deli.com. What's the Hello Deli? Well, of course, Rupert ran the Hello Deli for years and decades, and was the sidekick to Late Show with David Letterman. Rupert G, of course, you can still go to hello-deli.com and you can get mugs and shirts and official Late Show with David Letterman merchandise. I love doing the show. So passionate about it. Thank you for everybody who keeps responding and keeps it going, really. The community is what keeps this thing going for me. I just adore it. The stories, you could tell the enthusiasm that both Ritch and I have for this and many other subjects around the world of comedy, show business, and of course the influence of David Letterman. Please enjoy this episode with Ritch Duncan. Ritch, I am so excited to have you on the Letterman podcast today for a variety of reasons, a plethora of reasons here. You are part of one of my very favorite segments at the end of Dave's run, the Billy on the Street segment, but there's so much more. We're going to talk a lot about that. You've been writing comedy for a long time. Thank you so much for coming on the Letterman podcast. Born and raised in Indiana, right?
Actually, born and raised in Massachusetts. Went to college in Indiana.
Oh, went to college in Indiana. Always influenced by Dave. Is that's
absolutely? Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Was
very. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that Dave Letterman taught me in large measure how to be funny, the attitude behind being funny. That, and I say Bloom County by Burke Breathed are probably the two giants in my in my comedic. But I could also see that. Everybody who comes on here probably is. No one's like, what, Letterman? He stinks. Yeah,
Yeah, well,
no, Matt. I can't overestimate the influence that he had on my work.
Yeah, I mean, seeing him in Vancouver a couple of weeks ago, I got a chance to meet a whole bunch of people who were influenced by him and a whole bunch of different generations from a whole bunch of different spots in life, and the thing that. The sensibility and the vocabulary seem to be the things that people talk about more than anything, that there's this Letterman words or Letterman deliveries for jokes or just even askew ways of looking at the world. The sensibility that comes from that. So what made you choose, if you're raised in Massachusetts, decided to go to college in Indiana? What made that choice?
I really was honestly just ready to get out of New England. I mean, I had grandparents in Maine, and I grew up in Massachusetts, and we would go back and forth to my grandparents' house in Maine, and I was really eager to see the world. And unfortunately, I ended up in Indiana,
Well, that's
which is
part of the
lovely.
world.
I'm not slamming Indiana. Indiana's great. I will say that when we really wanted to have fun, when we really wanted to cut loose, you know what we do? Go to Ohio.
Okay. The love of stand up obviously there from when you were a kid. It's safe to say
Hmm.
that. Okay. When did you know? And it's obvious that you are not just a comedy writer, but you are a stand up as well. The delivery is there.
Hmm.
You've already got the poise. You can tell right now. Never mind the humor. You've got that as well. When did you make that step? I know you did some radio stuff in college, but did you do stand up at the same time?
I started stand up the summer. I believe it was the summer before or the summer after I went to college. But I was one of those guys that, for years walked around with had a notebook with jokes in it that I was just terrified to let anybody know that I wanted to do this. I came up during the 80s stand-up boom that was when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And I was kind of, um, really attracted to just the style and how clean it was, and the giants at the time, Carlin and Cosby and
Yeah.
Bill Hicks was big for me.
Absolutely.
Um,
Steve Wright.
and
I mean, Massachusetts, right? I mean,
oh
you
my
got a
goodness,
big scene
I mean,
in Boston. I mean,
Stephen Wright was so good that it was he almost is like not. I mean, you can look at him as a joke writer and say, "Oh,
yeah,
this is how you write a great joke." But his combination of persona and lethal joke writing, it almost made him not an influence, because nobody could do that. I mean, it's like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like if I was a murderer, I'd like to kill people like Bigfoot, but I'm just not built that way. Like Stephen Wright was just a joke writing machine, and did it in such a way that he was able to get up on stage and be so odd that he would unsettle people, but then would deliver something so relatable in that style. And, so that was, I mean, in terms of, I would say, I'm saying that Stephen Wright is impossible to use as someone who directly influenced me, but
yeah,
he certainly made the art of stand up appealing. I mean, we all had that. The album was the Eye of a Pony album.
yeah.
Um, and it was, and that, I mean, you would just, and I mean, it's very different in this era now where there's so much content all over the place. I mean, there was I'm not saying to say there was very little, but if you wanted to get stand-up content, you had to go out and buy it. You had to find somebody who had the tape. You had to, so we would listen to these things over and over and over and over again. And yeah, Stephen Wright, fantastic. And I just love also just being a guy from New England. You can hear that Boston accent. It never went away. It's that thick Boston accent, So yeah, Stephen Wright's great.
On Rogan's podcast, he'll many times talk about growing up there. He grew up in Newton, I think it was, and he would talk about the comedy scene in Boston in particular, of course, and some of these people that came up and that unique voice that you were talking about, all these killers that were there. But yeah,
Hmm.
we're in a time where, I mean, people really, at the end of the day, if they were looking for new stand-up comic, I mean, A&E, Evening at the Improv and things like that, was
Hmm.
one of the things. Every once in a while, you'd see comedy specials. HBO did their, but again, few and far between compared to right now. Very blessed to grow up in that time and place when it comes to that. I would say.
Sure. I mean, MTV's Half Hour Comedy Hour was a big
Yep.
influence of mine. Actually, someone who influenced me a great deal, who also was influenced by Letterman, was Jon Stewart. I
Oh
used to
yeah.
love, he was the host of Short Attention Span Theater back in the
Yep.
day, which I believe was on Comedy Central. If it was, might have been the Ha Network back then. Um, but it was Jon Stewart and Patty Rosborough would host
Yep.
Short Attention Span Theater, and they basically did stand-up comedy clips and sketch comedy clips the same way like an MTV VJ would do it. And
Yep.
it was just these lineup of great jokes and great comics. And it was just a great way to figure out not only how to tell a joke and the different ways to tell a joke, but the attitudes and how much persona had to do with it. So yeah, I mean, I remember when I first came to New York, I took a stand-up comedy class from a comedian named Eric Kornfeld.
Mhm.
And he dropped at a certain point that he was married to Patty Rossborough. And I'm starstruck. I'm just absolutely starstruck. And I had a joke. The joke was not great. It was God, I mean, what was the joke? Now I'm gonna blow it. But it was something like, I had such a small apartment. I looked over and saw like Anne Frank was hiding in the corner or something. Like it was, I mean, it sounds, it's not a joke one would do today. For a million reasons. But I like, and I'm butchering my own material from 30 years ago. But I remember Eric Kornfeld told me, he said, "Oh, Patty heard that and was laughing so hard." And I just was, it's like, when you start out and you're a young comedian, or even in the first 10 years of doing stand-up, a little scrap like that, you can live on that for months. Like, somebody, I remember very vividly, somebody told me once when I'd started out doing stand-up, I did a bit and they said Todd Barry was standing in the back, and Todd Barry had said quietly during my set, "That's funny." Like, and someone relayed that to me. I was, I mean, and this is the thing. This is where my comedy nerd, thing comes in there, where it's like, I get starstruck by Todd Barry and Patty Rossborough. These are the people that but yeah, no, it doesn't take much. When you are coming to New York or wherever it is you go, to find your community of people. And I feel like in my era, it was very much go to New York City, go to big town. But I feel like in this era, it very much could be find my YouTube community, find my social media community, find my online community. There's Tumblr people out there that, Vine people out there that, talk about these are the places that they found their comedy community. Oh, and before I forget, you talked about Letterman, how people used to talk like Letterman. I want to shout out a comedian I came up with who was great. Her name was Peggy O'Brien, and she used to, in the middle of her sets, she'd just sort of stop and she'd say, "So, are you like me? Do you talk like Letterman?" And we all did. Of course we did. I mean, that's one of those ones that like every comedian in the back of the room is going to roar at, and maybe the crowd will like it, maybe they won't. But those are the comedians that I'm drawn to.
Oh man, and I mean, like, again, this is the vocabulary that shows up. Are you like me? And I hope to God that you're not. I pray to God that you're not. That so many people, that's just part of their everyday language. The influences so much. I want to go back to Jon Stewart for a second,
sure,
because when you think about how he started his shows, and I mean, I go back as comfort food sometimes. I'll go back and watch some of these things that are so important to me, and what a time and place that we live in now, where it's not a matter of having to dig a VHS tape out of an old box at your parents' house because I know I recorded this. No, we've got the gift of YouTube where we can go back and watch some of these gems. You think about the shows that Jon Stewart did. He had his little deal with Worldwide Pants for a while, and was definitely moving in that direction. But you think about those shows with the puppet, Howard as the co-host, and the puppet stuff.
Howard Feller, sure.
And it was so inventive and so fun, yet at the same time had that same sort of the edge of cynicism, and then of course the edge of weird and the edge of silly and esoteric. And you felt like you were part of the club still, but just in a new way. And I go back to his last show on, I believe that was the MTV show where Dave was his guest. He was the final guest on the final show. And one of the things that Dave said to him is,
now I got to YouTube that.
Watch the whole episode. It's so good. And one of the things that Dave said to him is, I'm going to butcher the quote, but it's don't mistake cancellation for failure. And boy, is that true, especially if you were to look at that run of however many shows it was. It's the creative output of those shows. And people today, they think of Jon Stewart as the giant that he is and who he built himself up into, from the Daily Show and whatnot. But he was doing a lot of stuff that was really, really creative back then. And as a stand-up, his delivery was, you'd bring up, Stephen Wright, his own voice. You almost can't imitate that. It's one of those things where, I think about Mitch Hedberg, like nobody can ever be another Mitch Hedberg. Like he's just, they're that unique. And talking about John, so I love that influence, but you're right. I've been doing stand-up locally, not because I have any aspirations to be a stand-up, nor do I even think I'm that funny, but I want to get the discipline down. I was always the guy, in my family who people would be like, oh, the wedding needs an MC. Okay, grab Mike to do that. Or they need a, my father passed away last year, and it was just assumed that I was going to be the guy that kind of ran, that's the ceremonies that went with that as well. Was that you
Yeah.
growing up, or was it the radio that really brought that out of you?
I mean, I had a lot of there were in my family several funny people. My
Yeah.
dad was funny, my grandfather was funny. So I was definitely one of the people that my great aunt Ellen was really funny. Like there were people that were funny, and so to a huge extent, a lot of the sense of the humor there was I want these people to think I'm funny. I mean, like,
Bingo. Yep.
and so it was trained a lot in that way. And,
Yep.
And a lot of times it was the subtext behind it. I mean, the context of comedy, when you hear it and where you hear it and how it's delivered and what medium it's delivered on
Yep.
is so important to its ability to land.
Yes.
Which is really what I think made Letterman so extraordinary, because what Letterman was able to do, and this is not going to come as a surprise to any of the listeners of this podcast, but he was able to encapsulate the two contrasting ideas that show business was great and show business was bullshit
Absolutely. Yep.
at the same time. And I mean, you want to talk about like the David Letterman like joke. The perfect quintessential David Letterman joke to me is him sitting behind a desk, taking a pencil, dink, 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 dink on the mug, right?
Yep.
And he just stops and he looks and he says, "You know what? This is the only thing on CBS right now." And that's a joke you can't do today. That's a joke that in context, if you go back and you look at it on YouTube, like my kid's not going to have any idea how valuable that real estate on CBS was, how much fighting there was. And by making that gesture, the substance of the joke, I mean, it's funny because like he's doing a funny face and you know what I mean? Like,
Sure.
But the idea that this thing with all of this money and all of this fame and all these celebrities and all these things is bullshit.
Yep.
But not in such a way that it's a punk rock thing that he's gonna smash the set and burn it down and not be back the next day. It still is a way, it still is the medium that brought Johnny Carson, that brought the comedic heroes that we've seen, that has taken us from our living rooms into other worlds and other places. And that can coexist with fucking Gilligan's Island.
Absolutely.
And nowadays, there isn't, I mean, I find that you could get in the 90s, particularly, you could get a lot of there was a lot of traction you could get comedically by just pointing out that you knew something was hack, that you knew something was bad, that you knew something was tacky. And nowadays, I mean, I will criticize some pop star or something that my daughter likes, and I try to be as open as I can about my daughter's music. My father was not good about embracing mine, but my daughter will say like, "I'm such a hater," and there really is no reason in 2026 to be a hater, because you have options. You can turn I was almost a dial. You know what I mean? Like, but there's
yes.
You
can scroll
which is
past anything. You can scroll to anything and past anything.
Yeah. And, when people criticize young people, when they say, oh, all they're doing is staring at TikTok, they're not staring at TikTok. They are curating at warp speed. I mean, you look at a kid going through TikTok, and it's like the way the thumb goes, like that's saying this is worthwhile, this is not worthwhile, and knowing immediately what that is. And I guess you could look at that and criticize that. I mean, it's the channel flipping of the 2020s.
When the pendulum swings the one way, though, there's always, in my opinion, always going to be a group, whether it's a small group or a big group, whatever, that enjoys where the pendulum isn't at that moment. And to me, that was Dave. Like you talking about this, there's a moment that I go back to. I remember when my friends and I mean, we're in elementary school at this point when this happens, okay? And we're thinking that Billy Idol is one of the hottest, coolest motherfuckers in the whole world. He is like badass and all of these things. And he's going to be on late night. And we see him on late night and we look at Dave sitting there in a sport coat and just looking over him going, "Oh, your parents must be very proud." And you're like, "Oh my God." Like that to me, when he was able to let the air out of balloons like that, and show you kind of that perspective that you're talking, that's the cool thing. And to me, that was always the beautiful contrast between the Tonight Show and late night was, you know, Dave was that, if you want to, I don't know if it goes so far as to call it punk rock, but indie, for sure, indie rock. Like, and then the breaking of the fourth wall of the, you know, the inmates, a bunch of yahoos were given access to a television studio feeling, and that where we are going to take it seriously in our production, in the things that go on, but we're not going to take it seriously when it comes to, you know, the pomp and circumstance or the gaga, the ballyhoo all around us. We're going to make fun of all of that, including the guy who right now is on top surfing the world when it comes to who is the badass out there. Yeah, no, we're going to take the piss out of that too. And that was one of the things that I love, and to this day that I love about it. That I think Dave, you know, kind of perfected that, and he did it with stand-ups as well. If you look at some of the stand-ups that he would have on late night, because I know you were, I don't know if you want to call it the alt comedy movement or whatever, but you had inventive comedians. You know, I think about guys like David Cross and some of these other people that are out there that were influenced by exactly what we're talking about when they were young.
Well, it's the natural extension of the people that were cool and were good and were funny.
Yeah.
Took their surroundings completely into, you know, I mean, this is not a situation where, you know, you would take your vaudeville act and come in front of the mic and do your vaudeville act. I mean, Letterman is the institutionalization of stand-ups like Steve Martin and Albert Brooks.
Sure.
You know, where Albert Brooks would come on and he'd do a ventriloquist that couldn't do it. And you're used to seeing a ventriloquist who can do it, you know, but like there's a limited, if you feel like this opportunity on this camera and this television show is the most important thing in the world, you're going to show up and you're not going to do, you know, and to actually say, well, wait a minute, what if we depict how important it is to this person and then watch him melt down? You're operating on an entirely different level. Yes. And what is neat about Letterman is he never disrespected the level he was on, you know, or I mean, he elevated it,
sure,
by denigrating it. I mean, it's some next level, you know.
But then he has
if
Mort Saul on, and totally absolute respect for him, his style, where he came from, all of that stuff, right? But then, of course, George Miller comes on, or someone like, yes, I can totally. He appreciated every single style out there, but the alt stuff is where, in my opinion, it got to rise because of late night. Yeah, absolutely. Anyway, I'm glad we agree that Letterman was good. Were you writing back then too, or was it like what was your foray into it? Was it right? When did writing come along?
Well, I mean, I recently did a show where I said this line in the show, but it's true. I was always the kind of comedian where I would come off stage and people would say, "You are such a good writer," which is like one of those things like, you know, your material would be so great if it was delivered by literally anyone other than you. If you know, I mean, it's I do feel like what always brought me to the stage, and I don't know whether it was anxiety or not being super self-confident in myself, but I always felt like I needed to have that good joke to be able to have the confidence to stand up and do that. And you know, I mean, I needed to have that, you know, arrow in my quiver of, I know I got this good joke. So if, you know, and not everybody needs that. I mean, the reality of stand-up comedy is it's not a man doing funny material. It's a funny man doing material. And, you know, so and you got to be lucky and good at the same time. And in my stand-up career, sometimes I was lucky and sometimes I was good, not usually at the same time.
I mean, I get
And
that.
but I mean, in every instance, I mean, of course, when you're young, you want to be George Carlin or you want to be
Yeah.
the stand-up that's on stage that does these things. But it also, as you get older, there are um you realize that the ground shifts under you and that,
Yep.
the guy who's the George Carlin then, if the timing was different, the society and what people need at any certain point, there's so much that's not in your control. And what is in your
Right.
control is your ability to create art every day. And the way I was always able to do that was writing. So that's, and it also came out, like, I mean, I would say the emergence of Twitter helped me a lot as a joke writer. I mean, back when Twitter started, it was you had to do 180 characters,
So the
and you had,
parameters, I was gonna say, yeah, okay, yep,
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 you had to have an idea, and it had to be within this. And of course, now they say, oh, just write whatever you want, and then that the discipline of it. I mean, I'm not saying I would when I was writing tweets in that way, and when Twitter was actually Twitter,
yep,
I found the 180 thing to be limiting for sure. But
yeah.
I think ultimately it did make me a better joke writer. And now not only do they have no character counts, but they also the computer will write it for you. So
And that's
we'll
a
let it do
well, I
that.
mean, that's a whole nother place that we can go. But that was a question that I asked Steve O'Donnell when I had him on.
Mm.
If he preferred writing with a fence and parameters, or whether he preferred the open field, and
I bet she said fence.
yeah, the fence. I mean, because they had to avoid, they had to do a lot of things to avoid any resemblance to the Tonight Show, and so there were a lot
Sure.
of things they couldn't do. So the things that you can't do almost opens up more creativity, because now you got to problem solve. Now you got to think around that, right? And I think
Hmm.
Twitter's a phenomenal example of that. How about the collaborative process when it comes to writing? Do you collaborate, or do you prefer to do it yourself? So in
Um,
solitude.
I like to I like both. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm doing Deathbed now, which is horror stories for comedy writers, and I
Yes.
used to
We're gonna get
do
into that.
I in the early 2000s I started a humor magazine called Jest Magazine, where we would do short humor pieces in the vein of Spy and the old National Lampoon,
Yep.
and I really love the collaboration of working with an author that'll come to me with something and being able to say, oh, this is the part that I like about this, and having that collaboration.
Yep.
I also find collaboration to be great in terms of I have a really hard time summoning the ego to promote myself. Right. And if
Yeah.
I were to say, like, I have this, whatever, I have a website that tells horror stories by comedy writers. If I said, hey, I'm a comedy writer and I'm doing all of Ritch Duncan's horror stories, I would feel my immediate instinct is, well, why would anybody care about you? Right.
Right.
But when I say these are horror stories by comedy writers, I can say, hey, here's a whole community that I'm getting together. And if you can tell a joke, you can master the concept of tension and release. And that's also how horror works. That's how comedy works. These people are good at this. Let's,
Yes.
and then what I can do is for me, promoting others just comes so naturally. It's so easy for me to, I mean, whatever, like when I talked about Peggy O'Brien earlier, 1,000
Yep.
times it's easier for me to say, oh, this friend of mine has a great joke than for me to say, oh, well, I did this joke. I mean, earlier in the interview, I was like, oh, I did a joke and I butchered it. I sucked at it telling it.
Yep.
But when it's somebody else's joke, it's very easy for me to do it. So, in terms of celebrating the community that I come out of, and
Mm-hmm.
honestly, I've had a lot of different comedy jobs over the years for very
Yep.
short periods of time,
Yep.
but the comedians and the writers that I've worked with and that I've been friends with and that I've been colleagues with, they've been there. They've been the ones who have helped me out. So anything, if that collaboration leads to that relationship and that relationship blossoms and that community blossoms, that's just going
Yep.
to mean everybody gets more work and everybody gets to do this fun thing that makes the crazy go away a little easier.
I want to keep going to Deathbed here, because the concept to me is genius.
Mm,
Really, at the end of the day, it's stories in the horror genre written by comedy writers. That's the premise, right? And let's
yeah.
bring up Ben Zelevansky. It's you and Ben came up with this. When did you and Ben meet? How long have you guys known each other?
Uh, boy, I've known Ben for a very, very long time.
You knew
And
him
I
when
mean,
when
through
he interned
comedy,
for the show. You knew him then.
yeah, I don't know whether I knew him when he interned for the show. I'm not sure. I know that he was. We really became good friends when. We'd known each other and he'd been part of the scene. We both were friends with Chris DeLuca, and I think maybe DeLuca
Yeah.
might have worked on. Although DeLuca worked for Conan, so I don't know whether.
Conan, yeah.
But I don't know whether Ben and he worked directly together. But I remember Ben was absolutely one of DeLuca's buddies, and DeLuca knew a ton of people who were just smart, funny TV insiders. Like,
Yep.
We're talking about Chris DeLuca, who's just a terrific comedy writer and a stand-up, and
Yep.
just a good buddy of mine for years. And he's just always been. I always called Chris DeLuca like one of the best lateral comedians in the world because he would, like, everybody can tell jokes, but he would be able to be like, go to the side and be like, yeah, this guy's doing this, where his
love that, yep.
masterpieces were, a lot of comedians go straight forward. He had that Barry Sanders juke. He could go to the side and get the laugh that way. But so I don't remember. I feel like Ben came to me through DeLuca somehow, but
Gotcha.
I had done a number of after Jest folded, I ended up doing a lot of blogs. And that's what kind of got me into social media. But I did this blog about werewolves, which I got internet famous and got to write a book, and it was fun. But after that had happened, the lesson I took away from it was write about something that you want to write about. And what I really wanted to write about at that point, I've always been just a giant hockey fan. And so I did a blog called American Hockey Fan. And the joke there was there's only one, and it's me. And it was just kind of an irreverent, sort of profanity filled blog making fun of the daily NHL stuff. And Ben happened to be a huge New Jersey Devils fan. So when I
What
was
year
doing
are we talking here?
probably 2005, 2006,
Okay, so when
something
the
like
Devils
that.
were winning cups and stuff, they were winning,
Oh
always
man,
in
the
hunt,
Devils.
and
The
they were
Devils are
always-
still the best. They're still the best value for professional sports in this town. I mean, they
Yep.
put a good product on the ice generally. I think they're bad
Yep.
this year, but
yeah.
they
Well, no, I mean, there's obviously ups and downs and whatnot, but when you look at like well, I mean, especially when
those
Marty was
Brodeur
there with
years,
them.
and
Yeah,
Scott
I mean, when Marty
Stevens, and
was
those
there,
years were flawless. Yeah,
absolutely. I'm a gigantic, like I've got a crown on my back. I'm a huge LA Kings fan, and
okay.
I was there for the finals in 12, and
I was there
and
too in New Jersey.
there we go. There we go.
I
was down for the LA games, but yeah,
Okay.
but yeah, like
I went to one of the games in Jersey because it was affordable.
Yeah.
That's the beautiful thing about New Jersey. You could get to
yeah.
I went to a Stanley Cup final game with the cup on the line.
Yeah.
And I think I got in for I might have paid $300 for the ticket, which is like unthinkable that you could see the Stanley Cup awarded for that amount of money. And
I need this blog. Is
the
it still
Devils
around?
actually won that game, so I did not get to see the cup awarded, but it was
That was
a
game
phenomenal
5.
experience.
Yeah, because we
I
came
think
back
so.
to LA and won it in game 6 and 12. Yeah.
Yep.
Is the blog still around? This is like, as you're describing the blog, I'm like, oh my God, I'm your audience. This is amazing. We didn't talk about that before. What was it called?
It was called American Hockey Fan. It's you probably can find it at americanhockeyfan.blogspot.com. Probably. We definitely had an americanhockeyfan.com alias. But I forget why it went away, but it definitely we definitely ran out of gas on it after a number of years. But it was fun. I mean, there was a fun story where I had got into a little bit of a dust up with the owner of the Washington Capitals, Ted Leonsis, and it was a little tight, a little tense, a little back and forth, but eventually it ended up in a nice way. And he invited Ted Leonsis was a big digital media guy. And so he invited American Hockey Fan to go to DC and to broadcast from the broadcast booth. And Ben and I came out and did that together. Ben and my wife and I took a trip out to DC, and Ted was out of town that day. He didn't stop by and say hi.
He
I
set
don't know
it up
whether he really was or
fine,
not.
but not going to be a part of it.
But yeah, no, he had, because Ted Leonsis had a thing on his blog where it was like the Ted list, and it was like all the things he wanted to do, and it was like swim with great white sharks, and so we were just busting his balls for like. I mean, it was just to us back in those days. Also, Ted had a blog, and back in those days, I'm dating myself like crazy, but like to me, in my head at that point, a billionaire with a blog made no sense. Like a blog was for people like that don't have an ability to reach a wider audience. And if you are a billionaire, you can buy a TV network. You can, you know what I mean? Like, what are you doing on the internet?
Yeah.
So there was, which of course is looking back on it, short-sighted. That's
Sure.
I mean, he was the one that knew that that's where the technology and where the
That's
eyeballs
where the
and
puck
ears
was
were going.
as Walter Gretzky would like to say.
Yes. Yeah. You got to watch for where it's going. Absolutely.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. So I want to get back to death. So for people who want to go to Deathbed, deathbedwriting.com is the place to go.
Yes.
Where everything is. Okay. So I want to talk about this because like Steve Young has written for this, and
he hasn't been published yet, but I was working on it today. Yes. Steve Young,
Okay.
longtime Letterman writer, and wrote one of a terrific Simpsons episode called Hurricane Nettie. But yes,
Absolutely.
and he's great. Like Steve's been on the scene for a while. He's writing stuff for Slackjaw, and I got to perform with him a couple times at Kevin Geeks Out, the terrific video variety show that Kevin Marr runs, and Kevin's helped us out with Deathbed too. And so it was really through Kevin that I was able to contact Steve. And
right.
Steve is just, I mean, I'm sure he's another one of those guys that just has, you hear his comedic voice and you go, yep. And you go like, did he get that from Letterman? Did Letterman get it from him? Have they just been working together so long that that's what that voice is? And you get it from like Meryl Marco's stuff a little bit too. And some of these longtime Letterman collaborators where you're like, the attitude is in the sauce, and he does that thing that great comedy writers do, which is the detail around the premise. I feel like I am very good, if I can, pat myself on the back a little bit. I'm very good at finding the bridge between the two things that you don't really know why they're funny. I'm pretty good at building that bridge, but I think the great comedy writers are the ones that decorate the bridge with really fun language. And Steve's just a master at that. So it's been really fun. His story is called 555, and it's based on, basically, how when you see a phone number on a TV show or a movie, the suffix is it suffix? Yep. The three letters are 555, and that's how you know that it's fake. And so this is about a dirtbag Hollywood producer who starts getting scary calls from a 555 number, and the spooky fun goes from there. But he has these wonderful little details of the names of the projects that this dirtbag Hollywood producer had, and one of them was like a puppet show called Hurt and Ernie. Oh, no. And just like little and I mean it doesn't have anything to do with the premise. It's just like, oh, here's just a great little punchline. This is a thing that a guy like this would have. He has the assistant, the Hollywood dirtbag in this story has an assistant, and the assistant name is Broyan. And it's not Brian, it's Bryan, and never explained, but it's LA. So of course his name is Broyan. And it's just like, how do you have to give the assistant a name, and that's what he chose to do. So it's a classic Deathbed style Tales of the Crypt EC, horror comics thing where you have a bad person getting their desserts, in that fun comic booky kind of style. But it's the decoration along the way, that where you can really kind of see that this is a guy who details matter to.
I'm going to talk more about Deathbed because I'm fascinated by this. I think it's a phenomenal concept, and I'll come back to it in just a second. But before I want to allow some more praise onto Steve. Steve is one of my favorite humans walking the earth. I adore him. I consider him a good friend. And he's a guy that if I'm going through something, he's a guy that I can be vulnerable with, and I can do that. And I appreciate him so much. He wrote the theme for this show, which is just,
really
3 or 4 shows in. Yeah. The new
interesting musical background with him too. Absolutely.
There we go. And this is where I want to talk to you about this part as well, whether we get to it. I want to talk about more about Deathbed. So maybe we get to this and you can remind me to PS it, because I mean, here's a guy as well. Writer. Wait a second. Also a performer, and the performer part of him is blooming, and it's so fun to watch that. Like, the jingle for this show the first thing that a big Letterman fan who heard the jingle said was, "This reminds me of the Fat Man, the Strong Man, and the Genius theme," which Steve wrote. Paul and the band played it, but Steve wrote it. It's got kind of that rawhide sort of thing. And it's so cool to watch him, cross over the bridge of saying, instead of writing this for Paul and the band, I'm going to do these musical presentations myself and bring my own flourish to it. And I just love that. I love Steve. One of my favorite days ever was going to Steve's apartment, and he's showing me some of this music, letting me listen to some of this music, showing me some of these materials that he has that haven't been released. Like you said, the voice of the show. It was like the Letterman show was presenting things to me that had never been seen before. And I'm on his couch, literally like busting a gut laughing, which, he is, you can tell he's so satisfied from that, because he gives you the little, heh. Just as a little, you could tell that he was so happy with that. I got to ask you. Oh no, we'll get to the writer and performer part of it and how they can correspond in a second here. But as you're describing this, all I keep thinking about is Twin Peaks. All I keep thinking about is, here's one of the most scariest things of my youth ever, because when it got dark and deep, it went to the wall. It went all the way. And yet, some of the quirkiest, strangest things that would make me just light up in laughter, and the idea of a horror story from a comedy writer, genius. I love that you guys came up with this. I love that you're moving into this down this lane here. And I think about like Key and Peele. I look at what some of these movies that are coming out that are like, wait a second, but these guys are what? It's not supposed to be like that. It's so cool. Who are some of the other writers that you have worked with? And yeah,
you mean in terms of Deathbed, or
yeah.
Well, I mean, we have I have my fingers crossed that I should have a story coming in soon, hopefully from Andre Dubuchet, who's a longtime Conan writer. And he was a guy that wrote for me for Jest ages ago, and he's just got this wild creativity and big characters, and he's also a terrific comedic performer. So we have stuff from him coming in. We had a really interesting story come in from Scott Jacobson, who wrote for Bob's Burgers for years.
Yeah.
And we had a great story from CeCe Pleasance, who was one of Kimmel's writers for a long time, and wrote for I'm now blanking on the I wanted to say Captain Kangaroo, but it's not Captain
even
Kangaroo.
Better. Let's get Mr. Green.
I know, no, it's definitely not Captain Kangaroo.
No,
it's the Bill Nye the Science Guy.
Oh,
that's where she wrote it, and Bill Nye had it, but I mean, like, but she wrote the movie Bride Hard too, I believe. But anyway, but CeCe's great. CeCe, I came up with doing comedy, and she and her partner Katie Massa used to do this thing on the subway. It was called Subway Soaps, and CeCe would burst onto the subway at 125th Street in a bridal gown in tears. And then, Katie would chase through, and it would be this. And this is before, I think if you saw something like that now, you'd be like, oh, well, some idiot's taping with their phone.
Yes.
But in 1998, it was like, wait, what am I seeing?
Yeah.
And they would write these soap operas of like a bride gone crazy, and it would play out on the subway car between 125th Street and 59th Street on that big chunk of express track. And then at the end of it, they'd go through and hand out cards. What you just saw was Subway Soaps. If you like this, come to our show on this thing. And it was just this really amazing creative thing. So I mean, in terms of the horror piece, it is also like some of the stories are funny. I mean, Kevin Marr, who I talked about, who's just been a fantastic collaborator of mine over the years, he did a story that was a poem. I mean, almost like a children's poem. And it was about the monster under my bed. And I probably shouldn't, I won't give away the punchline to it, but it's worth reading, and it is not what it seems as it goes through. And it's a very I'm not even gonna. I shouldn't read it. It's called "The Monster Under My Bed" by Kevin Marr.
Deathbedwriting.com, and you can see it right now.
You can see it. Yes, and so so I mean, so really the idea of Deathbed, and well, I mean, I also had done this blog that was about werewolves. I had written a blog years ago. I called it whatishappeningtome.com.
Mhm.
And the reason I came up with the idea was at the time, all comedians, a bunch of comedians that I admired had started blogs. They all knew HTML. They were doing these really interesting personal websites. And I got on the Blogger at the time, and I just didn't know how to make a website. I didn't know how to make it work. And so, what you did see back then was people pretending to be other people on social media and on Blogger and on this and that. And so I said, wouldn't it be funny to do a blog from the perspective of a guy who got bitten by a werewolf? So you just sort of have his regular life, and then, you talk about how he gets bitten by a werewolf, and then on the day that the actual full moon happens, you just don't write anything. And then 3 days later, you're like, yep, woke up naked at the zoo again. That was weird. And so I just decided to do this. And then I ended up writing it for about 4 months, and never it said that it was by Ritch Duncan. I came up with a name, Kirk Thompson, and had him work in the video store that I worked at in Williamsburg, which was Real Life in Williamsburg, which was an awesome indie video store back in the day.
Nice.
And it got popular. I mean, not huge popular, but people were dropping notes off at the video store for Kirk Thompson. And
Awesome.
so and it was a
talk about
thing
Letterman-esque, by the way. That's like the influence there, of course, is just right in your face. People were dropping off notes for Kirk at the video store. Do you remember what any of the notes said?
Oh, it was just like, yeah, I hope you, whatever I hope you work it out with that girl, or whatever it would be. I mean, I think people would they read it, and because this was not, this was coming out every day. This wasn't this is before the era of I'm going to schedule all my social media posts or my blog posts. And it was even before the day of really too much curation, the way we publicized blogs was you had a blog roll of the other blogs you read, and you'd go over and you'd click and you'd kind of find these things. And there wasn't, most of the blogs in that era were very sort of confessional. They were first person, and they were confessional, and they were true. And so I had taken that style of first personal and confessional and true, and just added what I think a lot of great horror movies do, which is what would you really do if this happened? I mean, if you read the blog, I don't know if you will, but if you ever go back and read, what has happened to me at blogspot.com, it is very much, it borrows a lot from American Werewolf in London, both horror-wise and comedically, because American Werewolf in London is the ultimate, what would you really do?
Yes.
This is really, this isn't, spooky gypsy lady. I mean, this is an American tourist in London. If he does get bit by a werewolf, what does this kind of really look like?
Yep.
And I feel like that is, the comedic idea of just change one thing, is very compelling to me. So, I was effectively, even though I was telling a werewolf story, what I was really doing was parodying confessional blogs. So it was fun, and so
two familiar things together, and
and ultimately I was doing it because I didn't know how. I tried to do a blog that was my stand up and my material, but when I did that, it was taking material from one medium and forcing it into another, and it was fine. But I was reading, you were reading jokes that were probably best performed.
Yes.
So it was an interesting thing, and what happened with that was so neat in terms of it got optioned. It didn't get turned into a movie, but it got optioned several times, and it almost became a movie, and it gave me, a couple $1,000s when I needed it. And it led to a book deal that was, I wrote a book with Bob Powers, who also has written for Deathbed and wrote for Jest, who's a great comedy writer. And we wrote a book called The Werewolf's Guide to Life, a Manual for the Newly Bitten, which is basically what to expect when if you're expecting to be a werewolf. That's basically what it is. I think the book is brilliant. I think it's long.
Yeah.
I think it's a 300 words of how to really, and we took it seriously. We were like, how to be a werewolf. I think it came out about 15 years ago, and we've almost made our advance back. So I feel good about
that. Before we move away from Deathbed, because I'm fascinated by this.
But I told that whole story.
No,
Yeah, but the what I really wanted to do with, I mean, the fact that I had success with this werewolf project that was
Yes.
effectively a comedy horror project, and it kept kind of being optioned, was that there was the success of Get Out with Jordan Peele and Zach Kreger, Weapons and Barbarian, just terrific horror projects are coming out from comedy people. And of course, the classics, the Evil Deads, and I don't need to get into all of it, but I mean that pattern had been established. But also, I felt like if I did this project with this werewolf thing and it got optioned and it led to something else, why not create some sort of a publication, a place, a destination where there could be lots of these, instead of it just being one werewolf story that takes 4 months to unfold slowly.
Yep.
What if we had short little EC horror comics kind of stories that were like Creepshow, and that, who knows? And the way I have a basic release on there. So the stories are all owned by the writers who write them. Awesome. I think I have something in there that says if the thing goes on to be, to great success or something, and it can be proven that they found about it first on Deathbed, we get 2%. So the idea is, I don't even know what the number is. I don't know, but I wanted to put something on there that in case somebody did write the story that went on. I mean, and there's a great tradition of classic horror films being based on short stories. I think it's called Who Goes There? I'm not sure. Is the short story that was turned into John Carpenter's The Thing, or the Thing from Another World first, and then The Thing. Yeah. I think it's called Who Goes There, but it's a short story about The Thing, and the precedent for John Carpenter's They Live was a short story. First as well, so like there is a precedent
fight
for
scenes
these
in any movie too, by the way, and They Live.
Yes.
Roddy Piper. Yes.
Well,
anyway,
and I mean, another reason that you do a horror story in a short format like that too is because it gives a producer room to expand upon. Obviously the fight scene from They Live doesn't exist in the short story, but because it is a short story and the characters are clear and the overall arc or the gist or the twist or whatever it is exists in it, you have enough that potentially someone could look at this and say, hey, this could be more. These characters are interesting. Steve Young's, dirtbag. Maybe there's more to Brian than just his name in Steve Young's story. Possibly, who knows? And ultimately, the doing of it is also worthwhile. So like, I mean, and that's huge. I love doing stand up, but there is a maddening sense of impermanence to it. I mean, the magic of it is that it's a real person standing in front of you doing this thing. Yep. And, I can't tell you how many times I've looked back on my stand-up career and thought, gosh, how many ideas, how many things that I just don't, that I can't touch anymore, that I can't, so what's really, really nice about Deathbed is we started thinking about it last summer with the idea of let's pitch it before Halloween, spooky season, and we wanted to basically get one horror story out a week through the whole month of October and see where that led us. And since then, we now have published about 20 original horror stories that didn't exist in the world before we did this. And, and there's a nice blend of different kinds of horror stories there. They're not, I don't know that one person would read the entire site and say, I love all of these, but I'll bet you 10 people could read it and each one of those 10 would find 2 that they go, oh, I like that one, so, and we tried to do that.
It makes a lot of sense, and again, we're going back to collaboration and the creative spirit, throwing out these works and putting something new into the world. It's such a beautiful thing. I've got a question for you when it comes to that. The idea of a freeform or a poem versus, do you give them? And we were talking about parameters earlier. So when you have somebody who comes along and you want to say, okay, let's do this. Do you give them any parameters? Is there a word count limit? Is there
4,000 words?
Is that what it is? 2,000 words?
It's 4,000 words, and we figured that
4,000
out.
words. That's a chapter of a book.
Yeah.
That's a chapter of a book, basically. So,
And that's the
interesting.
ceiling. That's the top. I mean, and
Okay.
the reason I do that is, I mean, I think there might be one story in there by me that might be 5,000, and I can
Okay.
barely get through it. So like, I mean, I'm conscious of the fact that we're using a newsletter format. The reason we picked a newsletter format, we publish on Ghost, which is like Substack. But
Yep.
if you subscribe to Deathbed, subscribe.deathbedwriting.com, you get this horror story that shows up in your inbox on a regular basis, and you don't have to do anything. And we have, by signing up, we can contact our fans directly. So I'm not at the beck and call of any algorithm or any, we're promoting ourselves on Instagram because we kind of have to be there, but
Sure.
it's frustrating. I mean, like it does not feel like it did on Twitter 15 years ago, where if you have a really great piece of content, it can catch fire and people are going to retweet it. And I mean, it might catch fire and go to a wider audience, but it's not going to go wider in the way where, if I have a joke that is, like, my followers on Twitter back in the day were, writers for shows like Letterman
Absolutely.
and Family Guy. And I mean, Family Guy was like, if you wrote for Family Guy, those were like the Twitter Godzillas for some reason. I don't know. All the guys that ended up on Family Guy ended up having these massive follower counts. So you'd get a retweet from somebody who wrote for Family Guy, and it was like a big deal. But like, it does not feel to me like social media is interested as much in building a personal brand as much as it is interested in finding whatever the medium level is in there that, and then feeding it to people, so like, and really honestly
is more. Yep.
And what I'm doing here intentionally is also, it's horror stories. They're gross sometimes, like, it's not, I mean, I did one of my recent horror stories I did, there's a band called Top House, and they released a song called Deathbed. And they're just I don't know how popular they are, but they released a song that was called Deathbed, and I loved the song. And so I tagged them on social media, and I was like, because you guys did a song called Deathbed, I'm going to write a story called Top House, right? And I just thought it would be funny to do that. So I looked up where their band was from, and I said it in their hometown, and and I had the story I had in mind that I might have wanted to write, and I'd been in my head for a while, was the idea of a murderer who kills someone in Macy's and then can't find his way out because it's so frustrating. You cannot get out of it. And so that's sort of the funny thing. Like, you can do a horror story, but like, how the hell do you get out of this place? And it was just like, I was in Macy's and I was trying to get out, and I thought, God, it'd be funny if I, murdered someone and I had to escape for my, my freedom, and I could not figure out where the goddamn exit is. So I adapted the story, and I called the Top House the top of the department store. And I wrote this whole story, and the band did not care. I tagged the band, but this is my point is, I'm doing horror stories. Yes, I tagged this band. I was inspired by this band. I thought it was funny, but it's also ultimately a story about a guy who stabs a woman in the neck. It's not like that's not like someone be like, that might not be my personal brand. And I get it.
Sure.
But I mean, what I am trying to do is build community with other comedy writers. I feel very good about the premise behind the story and the reason that I ended up telling the story. All that stuff is fun. And so it ends up being that whether any of these stories do get optioned by somebody or turned into a movie or turned into a book or turned into a collection or a podcast or whatever they might live on as, ultimately the doing of it is worth it to begin with.
The process,
the making of the story, the collaborating with the writers, and in some cases the artists who do the art on it, and just that process is fun. And also, we are slowly building subscribers. We started with 35 subscribers, and now we're up to close to 200. And it's there's no one. I mean, the limit on it is going to be me. If I decide, geez, this is a lot of work. And I think we actually may slow down through the summer months to one story a month, just so I can kind of backload and build up a story library again. Because one a week is a lot. I really had sort of thought that there would be a lot more people submitting stories. And it is outreach has been a challenge. The people who do them and like doing them, it's always a treat, but it's also not an insubstantial amount of work to work with the person to figure out the idea. And just there's a fair amount of emotional labor in getting an idea that maybe isn't perfect for Deathbed, and you kind of have to say, well, I don't, this is great, but we got a story in once that was a really, really interesting, cool premise, but it felt like it was all dialogue, and it almost felt to me like I was reading an audio play of a horror story. And so I passed on the story, and I told the writer, I think it's great, but this just isn't Deathbed the way it is. And unfortunately, I haven't heard from that person again. And you know what I mean? So like, you always are kind of balancing. So, I would like to eventually be in a place where we have enough submissions flowing in that I don't really feel like I have to, work too hard with the writer or potentially hurt somebody's feelings,
Well, and passion projects are like that. You feel your way through it, and you learn these dynamics. You learn these, where the ebbs and flows are, and you find that balance. I love the message of the process is the outcome. This show is very much all that is the process is the outcome. This thing that you do from the side of your desk, but it feels good and it exercises that creative thing that's inside of us that needs to get out. The muse talking to you. Well, I mean, there are so many people out there who would love to do something, but they don't do it because they think the outcome isn't what they desire. Well, if the process itself is the outcome, all of these things will figure out a way. I feel bad that you went through I'm a relationship guy, right? I love relationship. And I mean, very, very few times, but it's happened every once in a while where there might be a staffer who doesn't like what I do or whatever, or there's some static there. That always feels bad. It goes right to the heart. But at the same time, it makes it better for the next time I have an interaction with another staffer or something like that. I got to ask you this. Have you thought about asking the Stangles to submit?
Well, I mean, maybe I will now. They just had a comedy class that they were looking at, and I went back and forth with them on Facebook. I forget exactly what it was that I'm terrible on social media in that, like, I have a funny idea or a reply or something, and I'll type it. And this actually happened. I worked with a guy named John DeVore, who does a terrific site that's 150 word movie reviews, and he had not liked Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein, and I loved it. And so I had written something saying like, well, putting it out on Netflix didn't do it any favors, and he's just got a great site for back and forth with movie stuff, and I get a big kick out of it. And he wrote me an email, and he was like, I didn't mean to do this, but I deleted your comment by accident. And I was like, this happened like a half an hour later, and I was like, I already forgot I wrote it. Like I'm a quick draw when it comes to social media comments, but
just get it out there.
Site. So, I would love it if the Stengels wanted to write a horror story. What I've also found is that there is no guarantee that someone who is a comedy writer will want to write horror.
Oh,
I mean, I think that people can. I think that the skills that it takes to do comedy, when looking through a certain frame of, I wrote it in the Deathbed introduction, and Dan McCoy, who wrote for The Daily Show and the Flophouse podcast, was a editor on the site. And, he had, come up with the analogy that, like, the old lady that, Three Stooges, short that points up at the delicate vase that's standing up on the pedestal and says, "Don't knock that over." That's the same as, don't drink me. You know what I mean? Like, or whatever don't step off the yellow brick road. Whatever these, and you can play that same tension and knowing that the thing is there. And you can play it for comedy, or you can play it for laughs. That being said, not everybody wants to do that, and that's totally okay. So, I mean, would I ask the Stengels to do it if they wanted to do it? I would absolutely. I'll tell you what, if either one of the Stengels said, "I want to write a horror story. Do you want to take a look at it?" I would read it the second it came in. I'd be thrilled to see it. As to whether they want to, I don't know, and that's also fine.
When was the last time you had any collaboration with them? What was the story behind that?
Well, I mean, I met them years ago, and I
Yeah.
was an intern at Chicago City Limits.
Yeah.
This is it was about the year. It was in the years right before Upright Citizens Brigade came into New York, probably
Okay.
1996, 1997, and they just made improv in New York City their own.
Yeah.
Before they came in and did that, Chicago City Limits, I feel like, and yes, I was new in New York, but Chicago City Limits was pretty much the cool improv spot at that point.
Yeah.
And people were still doing a lot of short form improv, a lot of improv games, which when UCB came in with the Herald and kind of said, we're not going to ask you, we're going to do improv and we're going to make things up. And you're going to know that we made it up because we said so. We don't need to, get there was, when you do improv games, a lot of it is, you're asking for suggestions constantly. And part of that is based on the idea that you're doing a magic trick for the audience. Oh, they just got this suggestion and I saw it happen. And what the Herald really said is, give us 3 and we're going to do 25 minutes. And, this isn't, we're not doing we're doing a magic trick in that we are doing improv, but you're going to have to believe us that this is really not, we didn't sneak in here with a script.
Right.
And do, so there was a sense from, the Herald and the long form improv that UCB brought to New York, at least in my experience, that made the improv games of they did stuff like they'd improvise a blues song, and it would be and I think today it's a little corny, but it still was pretty difficult to do, improvised songs and improvised music.
Absolutely.
But but I met the Stangles working at Chicago City Limits. I was interning and they moved from CCL was at the time at a place called Jan Hus Church in a church basement. And that's when I started interning. And I was interning there, they moved to a theater on 61st and First Avenue.
Yeah.
And the Stengels were on staff. I don't really know why they were. I guess they must have been getting paid by, David Weller or Jess Salmon or some of the Chicago City Limits people. Everybody was above me. I was the intern, so everybody was above me. I don't know what their exact role was. But they taught classes, and when I was an intern, I took tons of classes at night, improv classes, sketch classes. I took sketch classes from the Stengels, and they were great. And they ran a sketch show called Uncle Zeno's Chuckle Patch, and which everybody whenever I hear it, they, if you talk to the Stengels about it, they get embarrassed about it. But I didn't. I mean, whatever. It was a sketch show with a funny name. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think Justin had a radio show maybe in Australia where maybe he was Uncle Zeno or something like that. There was something like that. So it was related to something that he had done in his career in the past.
That was the impetus of the Zeno, the word Zeno.
Yeah, I mean, Uncle Zeno's Chuckle Patch. And also, I mean, I don't know. I don't think it was meant to be taken literally. I think it was a tongue-in-cheek kind of a name. But they said to me, just through doing sketch classes and improv classes and working with them, renovating the theater and hanging around with them every day, they were like, hey, if you want to come help out on Uncle Zeno's Chuckle Patch, we need, effectively someone to, change the sets and be on set. And so I jumped at the chance, and the cast was amazing. I mean, this was like Andy Daly was in that cast, Chris Regan, who went on to write for The Daily Show and Family Guy, and there were Terry Tocantins was in it. I think DeLuca was in it too, I think. It was this was also kind of an era where it was eye-opening for me to see well-written sketches. Doug Abels was I don't know if you know that guy. He was I think he might be writing for Fallon now. I'm not sure, but he was on Update for years, Abels. And I remember, and you want to hear a classic 90s sketch. If I'm maybe I'm getting this wrong, but I feel like Doug Abels wrote a sketch about this could not be more 1990s. It was Stephen Hawking appearing as a contestant on American Gladiators. Mm-hmm. And it was funny. I need to add it was very funny. But there was it was for someone coming into New York City, and really my knowledge of sketch was mostly SNL reruns. Kids in the Hall were great, but they also were so indie that there was like a step removed from,
Yep.
you know, well-written stuff. And I was just unaccustomed to great sketches being performed live, not on TV. And it was astonishing to me that all these people weren't famous immediately.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it just was. It was like, and that was a lot of my experience with Chicago City Limits too. Is I just saw all of this great comedic work and all these really funny people.
Were you faxing in at
And
this time to Weekend Update and all of that? Like, was that happening,
well,
or was that a result of being there?
uh, I was doing uh, the improv classes at CCL and working during
Yeah.
the day, but then I was also doing stand up at night. So I was out
Okay.
doing stand up. The SNL came for me, that started, and the timeline's getting a little fuzzy, but
Yeah. Yeah.
I was performing at a place called the Monkey's Paw that was emceed by a guy named Randy Credico, who was
Okay.
a wonderful lunatic. And he knew everybody from back in the day. And, like Soupy Sales would come on the show.
Oh my
And
God.
Colin Quinn would come by and do sets on at the Monkey's Paw. And, I was a guy who was a pretty sharp little writer, and I didn't have too many objections to. I think at one point Colin was doing a bit, and I had come up to him afterwards and I was like, "Hey, this joke is funny, but you could try this." And he was like, "That's funny." And when Norm Macdonald got fired from Weekend Update, Colin slid into that role, and Colin rolled through the Monkey's Paw one day, and he had a handful of little pieces of paper, and he was like, "Here, fax jokes, here, fax jokes, here, fax jokes." And everybody who had been working at the Monkey's Paw on Credico's show, got to do it. And so we would basically, the Monkey's Paw was, I think it's called Kettle of Fish now. It's right next to the duplex in the Village. You had to step down into it. And so we would, I emceed that show, and I would bark in audience. We'd stay out, and because it was Greenwich Village on Friday and Saturday, you could sometimes bark in 3 or 4 full audiences. So you'd get in 2 or 3 sets, and it was just a great, with, I mean, and he was like a big left-wing guy. Like he lived with William Kunstler's family.
Okay.
And
really?
yeah. So William Kunstler's daughters were waitresses at the Monkey's Paw, and we would organize like all the guys. There was a ton of people from WBAI that hung out there and drank there, and that was like the big left wing radio station back then. It was just a thrilling place to be a part of in an era where political comedy was really cool. The Simpsons was busting out all those great, political episodes and seasons, and so we would all send our jokes in all week and then huddle around the TV that had the captions on it and see if we got a joke on. So that's when that started. I mean, that was all I can really tell you is pre 9/11. But yeah, I mean, this is,
I was gonna say it's around the same time for sure. It's within
95 to 2000. Yeah, in that era.
My gosh, when Ben said that you and I would connect, he was certainly right. I'm so grateful to know you. I can't wait to see how else collaboration and whatnot can happen. I just appreciate this so much because you've been part of the bones of comedy. Like again, I have, as you're telling these stories, there are so many vicarious feelings that some of the things that you're talking about are things that so many of us who are on the other side of that screen, sometimes you want to just look at it from that perspective on the other side of that fourth wall. These are things that we wish that we could be a part of, and you were a part of it. You were part of all sorts of stuff. And again, we've only really scratched the surface. I do want to finish with the Billy on the Street story, because it is one of the greatest. And I know you've been a part of so many other things, but at the end of the day, this was one of those moments where, when Dave was about to leave, or when he was moving in towards leaving, he would talk about, you'd see him, how he would talk about how Jimmy is giving away things and playing games on the show or on his show, or people were, tweeting, and the Twitter culture that you were talking about. Dave would take the computer and be like, all right, and he would archaically type ridiculous things, and it was so good. But during his last, I believe it was in the last couple weeks of the show, it was in the last month for sure, he
Mhm.
got to be a part of something that was really hot at the time. That was Billy on the Street, and
Yeah.
Billy Eichner, and you were there for when that segment was shot. And it was one of
Yeah.
my favorite things leading up to the end of Letterman's run on Late Show. You were there for that. I would love to hear that story as we bring us out today for this, your first time on the Letterman podcast.
Sure, sure. Yeah. No, I mean, the only reason I was lucky enough to be on that shoot, and also that shoot was not a Billy on the Street production.
I was going to
That was
ask if they
produced by the
used.
Late Show.
Okay, I
Um,
was going to ask.
so it was produced by the Late Show, and I was the senior writer at True TV at the time.
Yep.
I had written for Billy on the Street, but that was sort of separate. I'd written a packet for Billy on the Street, and I didn't get hired, but they bought one of the bits out of the packet. It's anyway, we don't need to go into the one I did write, but
Okay.
what I will say is I was tremendously impressed by Billy Eichner's ability to ingest a script that was very intricate with a lot of jokes and replicate the script almost word for word. I mean, and um, it was just a huge. Also, Billy was very at the. I guess when you talk about being adjacent to show business. I do have a photo, and I'll see if I can dig it up and make it available to you, where there is a picture of Billy and Dave on the street, and you can kind of see in the background there's a couple of crew people, and I'm back there. Like you kind of have to like do a circle around it to see, and I feel like that's the perfect encapsulation.
Right now, by the way. Yeah, Rich, this is
Right.
this is the sweet spot of this show right here. You just encapsulated what this show is. Yes. Anyway,
Yeah.
keep going.
Yeah, like that's what my showbiz career is. Showbiz is here, and I'm just over there. It's just not. You got to look for me. You got to squint a little bit, and I'm just over there. But I didn't share that photo for a very long time because Billy took his we talked about context earlier. He took context very, very, very seriously on that show, as well he should. And he wanted that the way that show actually worked, it was like a lot of times it's shot around the Flatiron Building. The reason it's shot around the Flatiron Building is the sidewalks are very wide. So he can go down and there's a lot of foot traffic on those. And when he's walking down there, there is a trail of people behind him from at the beginning, and there's also people in front of him that have the release forms, and the release forms are huge. Without the release forms, they can't do it. So they have people with releases at the front and at the back, and then PAs and directors. I might be making this up. I feel like I'm not, but I feel like I think Bill Sheft was there in that crew behind that, and I'm just a huge Bill Sheft fan, and I adored his late wife, Adrienne. And so it was just, I mean, look, like here's Billy Eichner and David Letterman. I mean, and they really felt like generational spiritual partners,
Absolutely.
I mean, and so as a comedy fan, it was great to see that, but I would have been fine just to hang out with Bill Sheft and look at a monitor. But what was really interesting, I didn't tell the story of being able to be in that crew behind for so long because it was so important to Billy that Billy on the Street really looked like one guy. The whole gag is so dependent on here's this maniac, and it's
rando.
Well, I mean, what's great about Billy on the Street is it is a classic example of comedy is either taking something that's super, super important and acting like it's nothing, or taking something that's nothing and acting like it's super important.
Right.
And what Billy on the Street does is it takes something that's super unimportant, which is celebrity trivia, and making it the most important, urgent, and he has this
urgent. Yes, that's a great word for it. Yes.
I mean, Billy's a big guy too, and to have him storm up at you, and be like, why is Madonna doing this? I mean, like just that in and of itself. And if there is a big crew of people, or even the perception of a big crew of people behind it, or if people know, and by the way, big crew, there's like 8 people, 9 people, but like, if there is even that perception, then the gag is ruined. And Billy got that, and he was strict about it. And it was like, there was a little bit of, he had a little bit of reputation at True TV. He moved to True TV after a while. He had a little bit of reputation as a diva. And there were some people that were not crazy about Billy because he had, I mean, he was hot on the internet, like nothing
Absolutely.
really got ratings, but like, I mean, Impractical Jokers got ratings, but
Yep.
like, but I mean, we had Amy Sedaris and, great comics coming in, and they didn't really get big ratings. Billy didn't get big ratings, but like the product was there. And it was like
Yeah.
my attitude with, I mean, Billy was demanding for the things that he said and the things that he wanted. But from where I was coming from as a really social media person, and I was trying to have the voice of True TV be funny,
Yep.
for me, the product was there. He was delivering really good comedy with a really good attitude, with a real sharp sense of what he wanted to do and how he wanted to do it. And so in that situation, I feel like diva behavior is the cost of doing business. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like that's worth it. If what you're going to get at the end of the day is that,
Yep.
then be a little demanding, and nobody's throwing cell phones at people. And you know what I mean? Like, I mean, I don't know.
Look what the
I
show
did
is
not.
named after. Look at the guy who the show's named after. Like, I mean, at
Mhm,
the end of the day, and again, Dave's not a diva, but at the same time, I mean, there is a strength there of character
mhm.
where you got to hold the line because the content or the art is that important.
I got a good Dave story from the Billy on the Set shoot that I'll
Right.
tell you. Is we're walking along and somebody runs up to Dave, right, and kind of is like a little close to him. He's like, "Hey, I got a joke for you," and Dave goes, "All right," you know, right, and he goes, "What's the best part of sex with a horse?" And Dave just looks at him and goes, "Well, you probably get a ride home afterwards." And it was like he knew the joke, like Dave Letterman knew so many jokes.
Oh
But
yeah.
it was
Yep.
just like, of course that's the joke. You know what I mean? Like, and it was just like this guy came up and you could see the guy was just like, oh, but it was just this really amazing moment of like, no, that you're face to face with a comedy genius. And the reason
Yeah.
he acts the way he does and the way the comedy that he puts out there is because he knows what's great and he knows what's been there and he knows what's hack and he knows the rhythms, like, and so it was just I it might be the happiest I've ever been and I try not to get, starstruck
Oh yeah.
but
Yeah.
when you're looking at Dave Letterman in the last couple weeks of the Late Show at the Ed Sullivan Theater, running around 23rd Street with Billy Eichner doing Billy on the Street stuff,
It
and
was it
Dave
on
is
23rd? I was
born
going to
for it.
ask. Was it on 23rd? Is that
23rd.
where it
Yeah,
was?
they
It was
would
on
they would
23rd.
it's usually starts on the it's those wide sidewalks. So it'd be
Oh no, no, no!
23rd.
I
Oh yeah.
realized for Billy on the Street, but I meant
Oh,
what I was asking is so Dave took his crew and they basically replicated Billy on the Street where they do it at the
no.
same.
It was Billy's crew. It was Billy's
It was
crew.
Billy's crew. Okay,
It was
okay, okay,
Billy's crew and Billy's setup and Billy's producers. And the only
okay.
reason I got to do it or be there was really just because I heard it was happening and I begged to be there. I didn't have any official role. I mean, I was there because I did the social media for True TV. So I
Yep.
could, and Billy as True TV talent, ostensibly, but of course, in that situation, the Worldwide Pants people had locked down all that stuff and they wanted to control all of that social media as well they should.
Oh
And
yeah.
Billy, I mean, I don't know. I was not in those meetings, but I would assume that Billy was as honored and delighted that this was happening as anybody.
Yeah.
I mean, it really felt like it was a special thing.
Yeah, it really did, and it translated so well as for the viewer. You talk about that the urgency of it, and again, Dave being part of stuff that goes on nowadays. Hanging out with the kids, as he would probably put it, is such a great thing because now you get this sort of fish out of water kind of a thing. But he wasn't a fish out of water. Watching Dave run with Billy he had this big cheesy grin on his face. That's in my mind, that's a legit grin, and it translated all the way. It was such a wonderful, wonderful segment. It was what a memory that you have that you got to be a part of that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
if people want to find you, obviously we can go to deathbedwriting.com and I highly, highly recommend people will go over to that. And what you and Ben are doing such good things in creating that. It's such a great
And
premise
I
and
should definitely say that Kevin Marr and
yeah.
Dan McCoy were also huge parts of building it. All those guys were really
Great.
instrumental in terms of that stuff. So yeah, but
And that's that
yeah,
collaboration piece we were talking about earlier, right? And it's such a wonderful, wonderful thing. Are you still doing dates though? Like, are you going out there doing it, or are you on this
well,
side
you
of
know,
things now?
the joke I like to say is, I say, people ask me if I'm doing stand up, and I say, I do stand up whenever I'm asked. So no. uh, but no, I do actually. It's
Do you have a booking page though? If someone wants to book you, can they book you?
I did a ton of stand up last year. I was lucky enough to get asked to do Emily Flake's show out in Brooklyn. Emily Flake's a wonderful comedian and New Yorker cartoonist, and she just thought to invite me, and I got to go out and do that, which was really, really fun. And I did stand up a couple of days ago. I have a new. You know what always gets me back out to stand up is having a new joke, and this is the new joke that's been in the back of my head that's been pulling me back to the stage, where I like to say, I'm kind of a moderate on Trump. When he dies, I'll just celebrate quietly at home. No need to
joke.
go out and ring bells, make people feel bad. You know what I mean? I'll celebrate. I don't need to.
It's a great joke.
So that's been the one that's been.
Joke. It's a great joke to go out on. Ritch Duncan, you're awesome. I appreciate you very, very much. There's a couple of people I want to connect you with as well that I think will help definitely promote some of this stuff, but also I think you'll just be, again, the thing that I love about this process is the brothers from another mother part of it. And I feel like you are one for sure. I owe Ben another beer for introducing us, and I appreciate that very, very, very much. Thank you so much for taking time on Oscar Day. We're filming this on Oscar Day. Thank you so much. And we're going to go watch Conan go do his thing here, like right about now.
Yes.
Pretty close. The red carpet's going on right now. And I just want to say thank you so much for taking time. You've inspired me today. I love talking to people who go and they just unadulteratedly try. They might have a career doing something or whatever, but then they're going and shooting after their dreams, whatever that looks like. And again, the process is the outcome. I think it's a very important message, and it's inspiring. So thank you so much, Ritch, for taking time to come out and be on the Letterman podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me. I will take any opportunity to talk about David Letterman, and you've been a charming host, and it's been great. I would love to come back anytime, and if not, you, Ben, and I will go check out a Kings game sometime.
Oh, I like hearing that. Thank you so much. This has been another episode of the Letterman podcast with Mike Chisholm. Coincidentally, I am Mike Chisholm. Thank you and good night.
Here now, we're going to roll the deal.
Yes, this is the video. This is David Letterman and I on the streets of New York.
Billy on the street.
Billy
Here
on
we
the
go.
street. Hey guys, it's Billy Eichner from Billy on the Street. I'm out here with the new host of E's Fashion Police, David Letterman. We all know The Late Show has been a big breakout role for Dave, so we're about to hit the streets and ask New Yorkers what Dave's next move should be. You ready, Dave?
I am.
Let's go. Miss, for $1. Any thoughts on what David Letterman's next move should be?
Retire with lots of happiness.
Oh,
God
that's very
bless you.
nice.
That's very sweet.
Do you realize that every step you walk, you're walking in David Letterman's shadow? Sir, for $1, should David Letterman do a podcast now?
Sure.
Yeah, what should it be about?
Whatever he wants. New York City.
New York City. Would you do a podcast, Dave?
Yeah, I do a podcast about guys wearing shorts when it's too cold.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Okay. Goodbye, sir.
Good night. Thank you.
Sir, what's Paul Schaefer going to do now?
I don't know what it's talking about. Paul Schaefer? Yeah, well, good luck opening his mail.
Yeah, exactly. But really, what's Paul going to do?
I have no idea.
The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame isn't a year-round
He
job.
has connections in Canada.
Miss, for $1, what should David Letterman do next?
Everything.
What about like a podcast or something like that?
Yeah, you could definitely do that. Probably with you, right?
I would love to do that. That'd be an honor.
I love you, by the way.
Oh, thank you very much. This is about David Letterman. It's not about me.
You too. You're both amazing.
That's nice of you to
Two
throw
comedy
that.
legends coming through! For $1. For $1. What's the name of the theater David Letterman films his TV show in?
The Tonight Show.
No! No! That never happened! No! Miss David Letterman. David Letterman. The man's been entertaining you for 40 years. What have you ever done?
What am I supposed to do?
Yeah. It's David Letterman.
Hi, lovely to meet you.
Lovely to meet you.
You know he's leaving. Whoa.
Well, absolutely.
Where are
He's
you?
an
I'm
icon.
sorry to see you go.
Thank you.
Isn't that
Thank you very
nice?
much. Where are you from,
Yes.
ma'am?
Where are you from?
Pakistan.
Oh, Pakistan.
Oh, wow.
Good to see you.
They get the Late Show in Pakistan?
Yes.
That's wonderful. Remember when Drew Barrymore showed her breasts? Sir, where am I going to get my Amy Sedaris fix? Oh, look at you with your hair. Sir, this man invented top 10 lists.
Yeah.
David Letterman.
How about that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, boy, he's thrilled. Miss, what's David Letterman gonna do now? That's Letterman. What's Letterman gonna do now?
I have no idea.
Well, thanks.
Maybe he'll play shuffleboard with Dan Rather.
Worse things.
Miss, what's Biff gonna do?
What?
Biff, what's Biff gonna do? Sir, get off your damn phone. He invented the
Get
top
off the
10
phone.
list.
Get off the phone. Yeah, go to-
No, get off the phone.
Don't just.
He invented the top 10 list. Miss, it's David Letterman.
Hey, what's up?
What's up?
David Letterman.
Yes, let me ask you
Oh,
something.
my God.
Calm down.
Oh, what
calm
are we
down.
gonna do now?
Everyone, calm down.
my
Should
God,
he
I
do a
can't.
podcast?
I can't
Yes, he
control
should
it.
do a podcast.
What's Biff gonna do next?
What?
Get out of here! I'm talking about Biff!
Billy on the street, ladies and gentlemen.
Let the fun end.
They don't talk to me.
Yeah.
I don't talk to them. Bang, zoom.
All right.